right, let's do it. We have lots of great information to cover today, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you guys again so much for joining us today as we cover our marketing specialist came up with the name of Taming the Transition. I thought it was pretty good, right? We're talking about the menopausal transition, give you guys some tips, talk about what menopause is, and just cover some good information that hopefully you can apply to your lives and maybe ease some symptoms you're dealing with. So first, introducing ourselves, my name is Dr. Jessica Bachman. I have my PhD in nutrition with a concentration in exercise science. I am a registered dietitian. I was working as a university professor, quit that job to work for this awesome company called Stronger You Nutrition. That is what it's become today. It's been amazing to be a part of. I like staying active, and so I'm kind of a former CrossFitter, although with gyms being shut down again, I've been doing some CrossFit workouts again this week. I'm kind of a runner, yogi. I've done a strongman competition now. I just really enjoy staying active. I'm a mother of two. I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I'm really passionate specifically about women's health, nutrition, and fitness.
Oh, you want me to introduce myself? Okay, hi, Karen. No, you introduce me. I am a newer coach to Stronger You, but I've been coaching for a while now. And I do have a healthcare background, so just in the medical field and things like that. I am also a running coach. I grew up swimming competitively, and then I went to cycling competitively, and then I decided to do an IM, and so I had to learn how to run, and ironically, running became my favorite. So I am a runner, Jess. We can talk about how you can fall in love with running if you'd like. And I am a mother of two. I have a 22-year-old daughter and a 17-year-old son. And I am here representing the postmenopausal women of the world. Whoop, whoop. You can lose weight. I promise. You can survive.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah.
Karen, you're awesome. My name is Tony Acevedo. I do not have ovaries, and I will never go through menopause. So we'll get that clear. I'm currently a PhD student. I have numerous certifications in nutrition. I started focusing on menopause when I was doing my grad. I wrote my thesis on menopause. I'm currently writing my dissertation as well as a book on menopause. It is my primary focus in studies. I train a lot of women. I own 2 gyms here in Maryland. And that's it. It was a space that needed research, and I decided to take it on myself to make sure the research makes sense.
Also known as Mr. Menopause. You didn't add your title in there.
Soon to be Dr. Menopause.
I like Mr. still. It makes more sense. It has a good ring to it.
All right, guys, just a little bit about Stronger You. So we are an online nutrition coaching company, and our overall purpose is to help change the world's view of food and dieting as a whole. It was started and founded by Mike Dola back in April 2015. So we are, I guess, coming up to 6 years old. We went from 1 member to 40,000 plus members in 50 plus countries pretty quickly over that time period. So it's a fast growing company. So again, really, really fun to work for. So the topics we're going to cover in our presentation today is we're going to first give an overview of menopause, what it is, and some of the commonly experienced symptoms. We're going to talk about some different ways that diet, exercise, and other lifestyle behaviors can impact some of the common symptoms you might be experiencing. Give you some practical advice for managing weight changes and talk about why weight gain is actually happening during that time period so you're well informed, you know what you can do to make a change. And then we'll give you some advice along the way, what's worked for our members, and Karen's going to be giving us advice for her own personal experience as well. All right, so Tony.
All right, so the reality in menopause in itself, you have 3 different stages that you'll generally hear other people or doctors mention. The first stage being premenopause, and ideally that's anything beyond puberty, going into around 45 years old. And then once you start having symptoms that are related to menopause, you'll be considered perimenopause. And then ideally, when you're actually not going to, well, once you actually stop your menses or your period, that's when you're starting to transition, and this is what they call the transitional stage. And then after 12 months of not having your period, that's when you're actually considered menopausal and you transition to postmenopause. So that's ideally what the labels are consisted of. And the way you actually know you're going into menopause, and your doctor will do this at various points in times, but as a woman, you can decide when you want to know. And ideally what would happen, you have 2 formalities that will tell you that you're going into menopause. one being FSH, the other one being LH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinized hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, and they will start elevating, which ideally will start suppressing other hormones that are related with that, which are estrogen and progesterone. And this will start telling you and your doctor that you're actually going into menopause. The other one that's pretty new, probably about 5 years old now, and the FDA just released it, is anti-Müllerian hormone, which is extremely stable. And it actually is a really good idea. And you can actually predict when you're going into menopause. And this is just a really good idea. So it's kind of just the idea of knowing and preparing for it. And what I deal with a lot of with clients of mine is when they don't know, it's just that random, like, why am I having this symptom, or why is this happening? So it's just the idea of just, getting kind of ahead of the game in a sense. So common symptoms. So the most pronounced symptom and the most complained about symptom besides weight gain is having hot flashes, which are vasomotor symptoms. With that, we don't really know why that's happening. We know that it does happen. And we know that primarily the only way to combat that, besides, factors in the sense of, like clothing and putting a fan on yourself, is actually taking estrogens again. I'm going to go into more in a hormone replacement therapy further on, but those are kind of that is probably the most complained about symptom of menopause. So irregular periods, frequent urination, vaginal dryness, breast tenderness, the mood swings generally aren't complained as much with the women as they're more for the men, where we have to deal with the mood swings. But other than that, the night sweats and the hot flashes, like I said, fatigue is a big one as well. And then bloating, and I'm going to touch base a little bit, but Karen's going to go more into the aspect of nutrition, so she might touch base on that. But migraines are another big one as well. And then, like I said, the weight gain is more or less, it is almost, within the literature, it's almost guaranteed that weight gain is going to happen. So we're definitely going to try to give you tips to try to mitigate that as much as you possibly can. And there are ways to do that. We're definitely going to touch base on that.
And then something I just want to mention here too, like other things that are happening as a result of changes in hormones too, like that's a time period where your risk for cardiovascular disease goes up a lot. You start to see big declines in bone mineral density, loss of muscle mass. And so later on, we talk about some of the recommendations for things like physical activity and diet. It's to help prevent the increased risk you're getting from some of these other changes that occur with changes in your hormones as well.
Yeah, 100%. So a few of the hormones involved, obviously estrogen and progesterone are your two primary female hormones. They're also predominant in males too, but just not as high, just as well as testosterone. So within that, the primary role of estrogen is it's a growth hormone. It builds things. And what happens with a woman is as that starts to deteriorate or start to drop, it starts exacerbating a lot of these other symptoms that come with menopause. And same thing with progesterone. Now, a couple things, there are other formalities besides age that menopause can actually happen. So one of the biggest ones is hysterectomies. That will exacerbate and actually cause a person to go into menopause. So just kind of understanding that. So a couple other roles of estrogen. One on the list here, you see it helps formulating serotonin, bone formation, and what Dr. Bachman just said. So when one of the co-founding factors and one of the worries that a woman needs to have as they're going into menopause is, besides cardiovascular disease, is bone mineral density suppression. So that brings on osteopenia and osteoporosis. And after 60 years old, you're 53% likely to have osteoporosis as a woman. So that's ridiculously high, and it's scary. And one of the biggest key factors that can prevent that is actually exercise. So we're definitely going to touch base on that, but just to kind of get a good idea of what's to come. And if you're already above 60 years old, you could definitely start exercising to try to mitigate any more loss or degradation. Other than that, I don't want to go too far into it because I definitely want to touch base more when we get to hormonal therapy on exactly what the roles are, but just to get a good idea of what's going on. The other ones I'll touch base real quick is testosterone suppresses as well. And when we think of testosterone, a lot of times that we think of men testosterone, but in women, it's very predominant as well. Obviously not as high, but it still plays a key role. But once you actually go through menopause and you get into postmenopausal, the other androgen that comes from our adrenal glands is more predominant, and it definitely needs to take effect. And I'm absolutely going to touch base on that because I think it's very important to know what our options are going into the type of hormone replacement therapies that we offer or they offer.
Okay, so to talk specifically more about the weight gain we tend to see during this time period. And so just a brief overview of why weight gain even happens for anyone. This is outside of menopause, is at any time. Energy balance is the main determinant of where your weight status is doing at any particular time. If you're eating approximately the same number of calories that you're burning over an extended period of time, on average, your weight will stay the same. Looking at the figure there, the second picture there, if you're eating more calories than your body is burning, you're going to gain weight over time. This is not just in one day, this is over many, many weeks, over a long time period. And weight loss happens when you are consuming fewer calories than you're expending. It's a lot more detail, a lot more nuance than that, but to give you a general idea of what's going on, that's how weight gain actually happens, right? You're consuming too many calories. The chart I have here is looking at just different diets that are out there. Stronger You, our typical approach falls more in like the macro counting, if it fits your macros, that first row there, where we have our members count macronutrients. Macronutrients are where you get the calories in your food. And so we give you a balance to move towards your goals. Like if someone's trying to lose weight, we'll give them a certain amount of macronutrients they'll consume that will get them to eat a number of calories that gets them into a calorie deficit. I keep this in here because there are a lot of different dietary options out there. There's a lot of diets that people like to try. Potentially any of these could work for you if your goal is to maintain your weight or to lose weight. How they all specifically work for weight loss is if what you're eating gets you into a calorie deficit. So any of these options out there are appropriate for weight loss. Now, what's best for you to get all the nutrients your body needs, you know, a more varied approach, something like macros, you're able to eat a whole variety of food, you're not really limiting yourself, can be really, really helpful. And so again, that's the basis of what happens. So why is that happening with women during the menopause transition? Why is weight gain so common? Well, first, it is common. You know, you find some reports that say 90% of women are gaining weight during the menopause transition. So it's clearly affecting the majority of people out there. On average, and of course this varies a lot, even varies depending on what research study you're looking at, but you see an average weight gain of anywhere from 1 to 2 pounds per year. Last month, I did a presentation about holiday weight gain, and about half of that weight gain tends to happen during the holidays. So is that really a difference with menopause or hormone changes, or that just what we're eating and how we're moving on a regular basis? And so what research shows is that weight gain is likely effect of just time. It's just you, as women are getting older, if you look at studies that look at research that compares women who have gone through menopause and those who have not gone through menopause but are the same age group, you see weight gain in both groups, regardless of menopausal status. And so weight gain tends to occur at similar rates in women of the same age, regardless of whether or not they're going through menopause. What we're seeing is that one of the factors that's happening with women who have gone through menopause or are close to going through menopause, again, that decrease in estrogen will reduce lean body mass, reduce your muscle more so than someone who hasn't gone through that transition. So there are certain factors like that that do encourage more fat mass gain in women who have gone through menopause. But in general, the weight gain during that time period really does not vary based on menopausal status. So it's more about other things that are happening in a woman's life at this age range. So what is actually happening? There's a lot of different things going on. You know, think about the time period we're talking about here. This is also midlife. Women in midlife have a lot of things happening, right? Maybe they're taking care of more things, not just their kids anymore. Maybe their parents are getting older. They have more things to juggle. There's so much else happening where it just makes it really, really challenging to maybe stick to the same plan you had before. Maybe you're not able to cook as many meals at home. Maybe you're not moving as much. Add on to that when you start experiencing some of those perimenopausal symptoms where you're just not feeling comfortable. Maybe you're a little bit more irritable, you're experiencing some depression, some fatigue, you know, depending on how you're being affected, your sleep is now interrupted too. So all of those things combined end up leading to you eating more food. And the types of foods, think about what you typically go towards when you're feeling stressed, or you're not sleeping as well. They're foods that maybe are higher in calories, higher in fat overall. So you're eating more food and you're also moving less. And this can be something you don't even realize is happening if you're just maybe exhausted from running around all day and then you sit down and relax at night. Whereas before, maybe you kept moving when your kids were younger, or you didn't have kids and you were able to go to the gym more frequently. These are things you may or may not even recognize happening, but in some way you end up moving less and eating more. That can cause weight gain over time. Another thing we do see too, and this figure here is, looks at a bunch of different ways that appetite is controlled by hormones. The ones that I'm talking about on this slide are ghrelin, leptin, and estrogen. And so leptin is released by our fat cells, and leptin overall decreases hunger. What we see with this perimenopausal transition is that leptin actually decreases. So you have less of the hormone that helps you feel less hungry. Estrogen has a similar effect. Estrogen also works similar to leptin, where it makes you feel less hungry. Again, with perimenopause, your estrogen is decreasing, so you have less of a hormone telling you to eat less. Ghrelin, which is released from your stomach in response to when you consume food, that increases with perimenopause. So your hormones are shifting, they're making you feel more hungry, and there's less hormones telling you that you are not hungry. And so overall, you're going to feel more hungry. And so add the stress, add the interrupted sleep, all these things combined, you're actually wanting to eat more too. And when you feel more hungry, people tend to eat more, right? Hunger is not fun. No one enjoys being hungry. And so in response to hunger, you might end up eating more food than your body actually needs. Another thing that changes too, that with this time period in response to some of the changes in the higher cortisol levels, which cortisol is released typically in response to stress, your body's under a lot of stress during this menopausal transition. And so with higher cortisol levels and then higher testosterone to estrogen ratio, so even though testosterone is also decreasing, it's decreasing less than estrogen. And so as that ratio changes, you've seen a lot of females in this time range, they have more abdominal fat storage. And so women typically have more of a pear-shaped fat storage pattern, where it's more in their legs, in their trunk. And when they're going through the menopausal transition, you'll see more of a switch to this apple shape, where you have more fat stored in the midsection. Besides the fact that just like body image wise and how women feel, it's not typically, enjoyable for that switch to occur. There also are a lot of associations with increased risk for cardiovascular disease with that type of fat storage too. And so beyond just how someone's feeling, which is very, very important, right? As well, there's also health risks associated with this change in fat distribution as well. There are other things that are going on too, and this is one thing I want to really be sure to point out, is that if you're seeing change on the scale, especially if you're new to the menopausal transition, or maybe you started hormone therapy, you're starting medications to help with some of the other symptoms that you're experiencing, like for your migraines or anything like that, you can see changes on the scale until your body regulates to a new level of hormones, to the new medication you're taking. And so I have talked to women that, 4 weeks after starting a new medication, they're like, my weight is up 6 pounds. Like, I haven't changed what I'm eating. It might just be your body adjusting still to that new medication. So you might just have some bloating, some gas, some water retention. Those things can also be what's happening. And so don't freak out if you're kind of working with your MD, kind of find what level of hormone is appropriate for you. If you're trying some new medications, if the scale is up really quickly, it's probably not actually fat mass gain. It's probably just some water retention or something else going on. And so the scale doesn't always tell the whole picture. There's a lot of things that can affect what's actually shown on the scale as far as weight. Okay.
All right. So I'm taking over for food nutrition, and I wish that I could say right now that we're going to tell you exactly what it is that you need to eat, and all your symptoms will be gone. That is not the case. And really, go ahead and go to the next slide, Jess. This is sound advice regardless of where you are. Whoa! Sorry, my cat. This is sound, of course, right when I start. This is sound advice regardless of where you are in these phases of life. It doesn't really, when you start menopause, when you start perimenopause, if you have already established these types of nutrition and eating habits, you are setting yourself up for success as you go through this journey. So if you are on the younger side, my suggestion is start these things now. And these things are eating nutritionally adequate and satisfying diet that helps with weight management. And so how do you do that? Well, you focus on your calorie intake as well as the nutritional content of your food. And when you are eating really what we call low macro, high nutrient foods, you're able to eat much more without eating a huge amount of calories. So what are we talking about? We're talking about fresh fruits and vegetables. We're talking about lean cuts of meat. We're talking about healthy whole foods. when you are focusing on what you're eating and stopping when you feel full, when your stomach starts to expand, these satiety hormone, the stretch receptors go and we feel satiated. Stop. Don't just keep eating. Slowly, eating slowly is a huge key to this, because it allows your stomach time to recognize, oh, I've had enough food here. Okay, I'm good to go. One of the biggest things that we see with a lot of women is protein. Lots of low protein. And really, so there was a study that has kind of been misinterpreted around protein. And the concern was that too much protein damages your kidneys. Well, really, if you are going in with damaged kidneys, yes, you should be watching your protein intake. However, if you have 2 functioning kidneys and they are healthy, you really can eat quite a bit of protein. And so what we're recommending is 1.6 grams per kilogram of your body weight per day. And somebody's going to have to do the math for me off the top of my head. I'm like, I'm blanking on the pounds. I'm blanking on that conversion. So quick, somebody do the math for me.
It's pounds divided by 2.2.
Okay. So what is why do we want you to eat protein? Well, protein is so essential for so many things. It is what helps us build that lean body mass. It's what helps us build the structure that we really want to increase. All right, go ahead. So what does this look like? Well, make most of your plate fruits and veggies, complex carbs. Try not to eat a lot of processed foods. Are processed foods absolutely forbidden? No, thank goodness. Who doesn't love a really good processed food? But it's not my primary source of my carbohydrates. Fruits and veggies are, complex carbs are, oatmeal. Healthy fats. Don't avoid your fats. Fats are necessary. Fats are one of our necessary macronutrients. And so don't avoid them. And when we say healthy fats, what are we talking about here? We're talking about olive oil. We're talking about coconut oil. We're talking about avocado oil, things like that, that really can, it helps with satiation again, and it makes your food taste better. So go for it. You want to stay hydrated. Ideally you're drinking half your body weight in ounces, which if you have not been doing that before, it can be kind of a little bit of a shock to your bladder. But I'll tell you, that was a game changer for me when so I started with Stronger You when I was perimenopausal. I was perimenopausal when I started with Stronger You, and I started drinking half my body weight in water, and it was amazing how much better I felt from water alone. The brain fog that happens with perimenopause and menopause, did it eliminate it? No, but it's like all of a sudden I had clarity again, and it was so lovely. So really, water is going to be a big game changer. Limiting alcohol intake is, again, it goes towards so many things, particularly when you're just trying to improve your overall lifestyle, improve your overall health and nutritional values. Limiting alcohol can really have a huge benefit. And there's Jess did a great webinar 2 months ago, was it now, on alcohol and body composition. And it really is enlightening when you stop and you look at the amount of alcohol that you're drinking and what it's doing to your weight, what it's doing to your overall mood and feeling. It really can make a huge difference if you limit that alcohol intake.
Okay, so looking at exercise, one of the main things that's happening with menopause is that reduction in estrogen really impacting lean body mass and bone mineral density. And one of the best ways, besides adding adequate amounts of protein to your diet, that's really important for both bone health and for lean body mass, is to make sure you're doing strength training. So strength training, you're stimulating your muscles to maintain, if not grow, lean body mass. Why is that important? It's important for you to be able to just to do activities of daily living later on, to be able to move, to support not being one of the statistics that there's a broken bone later on in life too. And so how much is enough? This is the bare minimum. And this is based on recommendations from the physical activity guidelines for Americans. It's at least 2 times per week working every major muscle group. That's going to be a pretty long lifting session. I would prefer someone goes 4 to 5 times per week if you can do that. But as long as you're hitting this minimum, that is better than doing no strength training. A lot of women maybe haven't been exposed to that too much. That hasn't been a priority for them in their lives. If I could talk to a female to do anything beyond changing their diet, maybe sleep, because I'm big on sleep too, but adding in strength training is so important for their health. I would say for mental health too, when you're going through this menopausal transition, there's lots of stress. There's lots of, if you are gaining weight, focusing on something other than the scale and focusing on trying to lift heavier weights can have such an impact on your mental health as well as your physical health. It really is life-changing. And so I highly recommend people, consider adding strength training into whatever exercise regime you're doing right now. Moderate intensity aerobic activity is still really important. So according to physical activity guidelines, 150 minutes per week. That's more for the benefit of overall cardiovascular health. So also important, but for me, I'd prefer that you prioritize strength training and the time that you have available, and then also keep your body moving. And so daily movement, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis or NEAT, is just moving around. So me talking with my hands right now, me moving around, that is something that has been really impacted this year with coronavirus, because I know for me, I don't really leave my house. I walk from my bedroom to my office inside my house. The only time I leave is to really go to the gym, and people aren't even leaving their houses to go grocery shopping as much or going shopping, all those kinds of things we were moving around beforehand. Now you're just moving less in general on a daily basis when you're in this kind of quarantine isolated status. And so that's an area that if people can focus on just moving more as well as strength training, you see huge improvements over time that can be really impactful on weight status, yes, but even more importantly, mental health, physical health, and just how you're feeling overall.
So Jess, real quick.
Yeah.
If I'm a woman, I lift a lot of weights, am I going to get big and bulky?
I've been trying to get big and bulky for a long time now. It hasn't happened yet. So I think I added 3 pounds of muscle this year, and I've been lifting heavy for a very, very, very long time.
I have this conversation all the time with my members, and it really is, even if it's just using resistance bands, anything that is causing you to tense your muscles and move. That's what we're talking about here. So resistance band training is great.
Yeah, to add with that too, I think that is something that we can do a whole webinar about that, right? About women and strength training. But honestly, your body frame and size, mine looks smaller since I started really lifting heavy weights because, right, I changed my body composition where now you can see the muscles in my arm, which makes my arm look smaller than when I had less muscle and more body fat. And so really by putting on muscle, you're actually changing yourself in many ways to look more compact if that's what you want to do, So there's a lot of benefits for sure. And no, I can't get big. I keep trying.
Just to touch a little bit base, because majority of my studies are in this space right now. And the reality is exactly what you just said about prioritizing strength training. That is so important because more and more I see a lot of my clients, they're rocking the Peloton right now, which is a great thing to do in the aspect of cardiovascular wise, but it is actually doing more harm to your bone density than you think. And there has to be some sort of weight-bearing, low derivative type of exercise to actually tell your body to create new bone. And if you don't do that and you're constantly doing, non-load bearing exercises like Peloton and or swimming, you're actually doing yourself an in-service. So you have to incorporate strength training or some sort of plyometrics or something to actually pull that muscle on that bone and say, okay, cool. We need to stop reabsorbing bone and create new bone. So it's definitely important to add in. And I know when I do a lot of my research, one of the biggest scares for a woman is to say, oh, I don't want to get big and bulky. And believe me, as I tell you, just like Jess said, it is almost impossible. One, you have to eat enough. Two, you got to have the hormonal function to support that mechanism, which, if you're going through menopause, you really don't unless you're going with hormone replacement therapy. But even then, you have to be in such a high caloric surplus that I rarely see it happen. Most women at that point just try not to lose muscle, let alone try to gain it. So
which is an amazing goal, right? With everyone else losing every year,
Yeah.
just maintaining your muscle is a perfect goal.
That's a huge win. That, you
and
mentioned stability.
It definitely gets harder. It definitely gets harder, I will tell you.
100%.
Sure. Yeah. Stress and sleep. And so I recognize that this is covering stress on one side and sleep on one side is inadequate. There's a lot of stress in life. And so I'm not just saying doing yoga and meditating every day is going to change everything. But I will say that, things that maybe you were able to ignore before or could just kind of, not think about builds up over time, right? And so you really might have to be much more purposeful about your stress reduction, how you're approaching life in general, taking time every day to try and reduce stress, to be very purposeful about that because it is so important for you. Both your hormones. So again, with cortisol being released in higher amounts, that does have an impact on fat mass gain, particularly in your abdomen. We also develop habits that are not helpful over time. So a lot of us, stress eating is a thing. Like that's something that a lot of us do in response to stress. That's a habit we built over time. There's nothing about stress that has to equal food. But if you start responding to stress in that way when you're really, really young, you continue to do that over time, that becomes your go-to response to stress. And so you have to work really, really hard to build in alternative options for what you can do in response to stress. And so I do encourage people to have a list of what is good for you. So what are things that help you when you're stressed out? For me, it's going for a walk, it's calling a friend. I love to meditate. I try and do it daily, journaling. Like these are things that I try and have in my daily practice daily. And then also when I am stressed out, I say, okay, let's go to the gym, let's go for a walk. Like I have those things ready to go rather than turning to food. And then over time, you can break that association. And I really have done that. It took a while to get there, but I don't think food when I first get stressed out. I think, let me go for a walk or let me call a friend. Like that's the thing that I turn to first. And so again, this is very much like, hey, just, think about it. Don't let yourself get stressed. I understand that's insufficient depending on the level of stress you're going through with this year. But a lot of it really is in your own mindset, and you have to think that you can do this and that you can make changes, you can respond to stress differently, and then you just have to believe it.
Jess, real quickly, I had a real big aha moment this year when COVID hit and, everybody's stress went from here to here. And I realized that I was allowing stress, the uncertainty of life to bleed into what I thought was the uncertainty of my nutrition and my exercise. And it dawned on me, I was like, no, wait a minute. That's not uncertain. I actually have control over this. This portion, I don't need to be out of control because I know exactly what I need to do. And that was so freeing for me to just say, okay, this I know. Okay, it's just I'm not gonna allow that to invade. I sort of flipped the script on it, and it really opened my mind to now I can focus my energies where I need to focus them, not here.
Absolutely.
I know what to do here.
For sure. And real quick, without getting into all the mechanisms, if you eat healthy, you eat sufficiently, you're providing your body with enough micronutrients because they're very important. The metabolic aspects of dealing with stress become more sufficient. So if you're eating, and I'll be layman with this, if you're eating like crap, it is way harder to deal with stress. But if you're eating very healthy, all of a sudden you just are understanding that you can handle much more to your plate than you would before.
Absolutely. And then sleep, again, I do a whole webinar about sleep because I love talking about sleep. I was one of those people that I used to sleep like 5 or 6 hours, and I was like, oh, I feel fine in that amount until I slept 7 to 8, and I realized how much better I felt. I mean, sleep has an impact on so many areas of your life. This figure here, I'm not going to go through all of it in detail because I want to save plenty of time for a Q&A, but these are all different pathways where not sleeping enough can lead to weight gain over time and eventually to obesity. So it has effects at the hormone levels, some of those same hormones we talked about before with ghrelin and leptin. You really do feel physically more hungry when you don't sleep well. When you sleep less than 7 hours per night, you're more fatigued, you're not going to be as physically active. So there are so many things that sleep impacts. It's harder to deal with stress when you're tired, right? And so trying to prioritize sleep. And again, I realize I'm talking to someone who hasn't started perimenopause yet. I know that there are things that impact sleep. So things like the hot flashes, night sweats, there's much more challenges for many people falling asleep, waking up more often. I get it. But to try your best to kind of set up your environment so it's a cool environment, having a fan on, having ice cold water near the bedside, Not drinking so much water before bedtime, so you're not getting up and having to go to the bathroom all the time, as much as possible to do these sleep hygiene things to try and ensure that you can fall asleep and stay asleep for ideally 7 to 8 hours can have a huge impact on how you're feeling overall, and also how much weight gain will happen during this time period. Karen, I see you shaking your head. Just going to add about sleep in that part.
Yes. Yeah. So sleep hygiene, real quickly. What is sleep hygiene? Sleep hygiene is recognizing that your bed is for sleeping in. It's not for watching television. It's not for eating. It really, ideally, shouldn't even be for reading in. My physician and I, because I started having some insomnia and in my early 40s, and I had a long conversation with my physician about it. And she said, you know, your bed really should be for two things. And one of them is sleeping. And so it was a big eye opener for me, how much time I spend on my phone when I'm in my bed, and how much time I spend, you know, just sort of not relaxing there. And so what she instructed me to do is, if I've been trying to fall asleep for 15 minutes and it hasn't happened, get out of bed. And if your brain is racing, write down whatever it's racing. Take that moment to journal, take that moment to meditate, take that moment to go inward and reflect on what's happening, and just kind of allow it to settle naturally. And the hot flashes are while you're sleeping. I grew up with hot flashes while I was sleeping. I grew up with hot flashes while I was sleeping, and it was not uncommon for me to wake up completely drenched, even as a young woman. And they are real when you are going through menopause or perimenopause, and going through 2 or 3 sets of pajamas at night, beds soaking wet. It's crazy. It is just crazy. And I figured out ways to manage my hot flashes during the day, but the night was a real challenge for me.
Touching in the literature, one of the primary components actually reducing hot flashes has been shown to be low doses of estrogen, so estrogen replacement therapy. But beyond that, it has legitimately been a direct correlation between BMI and symptoms. So if you have a lower BMI, or if you're just healthier and you exercise and you focus on normalized sleeping, you will most likely have less symptoms than somebody who is unhealthy.
Yep.
And that's a great transition into talking a little about hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah, so first and foremost, before you even think about hormonal replacement therapy, you have to ask your doctor if you're the right person for it, because that's what it really boils down to. And a lot of it will go down to what your health history resides. If your parents are more prone to different breast cancer is a big one, but there's other cancers as well that you should be aware of. But that is a conversation that you should have with your doctor. As for me, I'm not pro or against it. I think for certain cases it's extremely beneficial, but in other aspects, I don't think it's necessary. So the reality is there's many formalities of hormone replacement therapy. Primarily, they're inducing some form of androgen and or estrogen or progesterone. So there's pills, there's nasal sprays, there's gels, there's injectables, there's pellets, there's so many different kinds. But first and foremost, you think about testosterone, right? So if you induce, and ideally those would come in gels, pellets are probably the most common, and then injectables. If you induce testosterone, there are some benefits in the sense of, one, it actually helps reduce adipose tissue around your stomach, which women hear that and they're like, oh yes. But in retrospect to that, it actually decreases insulin sensitivity. So it's like Peter stealing to pay Paul, that whole situation. So it can reduce, adipocytes, but you're actually, if you eat or you have a higher intake of bad carbohydrates, you're getting a higher insulin response. So you can actually gain weight. So it's like, okay, well, what's better or what's worse? So I'm torn on that situation. Ideally, I've seen it most beneficial for women who are avid strength trainers and they care about their performance. I see them getting testosterone replacement therapy because it makes more sense for that population. If you're not like that, then I don't really find it a necessary reason. So beyond that, the other one, as testosterone suppresses when you get into menopause, your adrenal function, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but your adrenal function, the androgen that it releases, DHEA, that's more prevalent. And it makes more sense when you're postmenopausal to induce that or take DHEA. That makes more sense. And of course, you're going to talk to your doctor first, but that has a ton of great literature on it actually reducing a lot of symptoms and actually creating a lot of functionality, especially when we're talking about bone mineral density. That really helps. And the other key aspect to that I really like is it doesn't affect breast tissue because it only affects aromatase, and aromatase is only in adipocytes and muscles, and it's not breast tissue. So you don't necessarily, if you're a high risk for breast cancer, you could get away with taking DHEA as opposed to testosterone. So I like that aspect there too. Now going into estrogen or estrogen replacements and progesterone, the literature is awesome in the sense of, just low doses of estrogens and progesterones have really helped women suppressing, any kind of vasomotor symptoms, really helping with, just about every symptom that a woman adheres to. And it's not for everybody, it doesn't work for everybody, but it does help in some aspects. And the simplicity of it is, so you think about you're going to menopause and estrogen and progesterone suppress, you reduce it, you reintroduce it into your system, it goes back up, it kind of renormalizes you. Now, with that being said, you can't take it forever because at some point in time, you start getting negative aspects of the replacement therapy. So, and again, you have to pay attention to what your body's doing. You're continuously getting your lab work done. You're always in conjunction and talks with your doctor if you do that route. So that's the kind of plus and minuses of it. Beyond that, in the sense of cardiovascular risk, there's nothing as far as hormone replacement therapy that really says one works better than the other or anything in that nature. Exercise in itself, without a doubt, exercise is still the primary treatment for just about everything, and that should be your first go-to.
Exercise and weight management, right? Like those two together, like.
No, 100%. And when you're talking about all-cause for mortality, so this is where, taking DHEA, so once you get a postmenopause and after 60, grip strength is an all-cause for mortality and you get reduced strength. And if you intake DHEA, that actually increases strength and actually can reduce the all-cause for mortality for grip strength. So there's some really good benefits in that sense. But like I said, it has to be individualized. You can't listen to your friend Betsy and she's taking it and she loves it. Like, you have to go talk to your doctor and you have to make sure you're the right candidate for it because everybody's biochemistry is completely different. And it might not be, you might be 51 going into menopause. This might not be the right time for you. It might be at 55 when a lot of your symptoms suppress and then you can induce it. So there's got to be a right time for everything.
Okay, and Karen.
All right, so tying it all together. So, if you are currently listening and you are going through perimenopause, menopause, this is a challenging time. We're not going to sugarcoat it. It can be a really, really challenging time. However, you can, by making lifestyle choices today, even if you aren't at an ideal weight, even if you aren't exercising, even if you aren't doing these things, starting today, you can change some lifestyle things that will make a significant impact tomorrow and for the rest of your life. The key here is that it can't be temporary. This really does need to be a lifestyle kind of a change. A lot of people go into a diet to lose weight just for an event, but what we're really trying to help people see is that this is for life. We can't just cut calories and then go back to our regular lives afterwards. We need to be very conscious and food conscious and movement conscious as we are going through these very hard changes to our bodies. Weight gain is not inevitable. I lost weight perimenopause to postmenopausal. I lost 20 pounds. And so it is not inevitable, I promise you. And it wasn't because I was working out like a fiend, and it wasn't because I was only eating 900 calories. I was eating 1,700 calories. And, yes, I am a runner, but I was only running about 3 or 4 times a week. And I was running 3 or 4 times a week before I started Stronger You, not understanding why I wasn't losing weight. Suddenly I get my calories in control and I start losing weight. Eating well, staying active, And when we say eating well, it's not just about the calories. As Tony said, this is around so we talk about macronutrients a lot, and these are your fats, your carbs, and your proteins. But what we're talking about when we talk about micronutrients, these are your vitamins, these are your minerals, these are your things that really support other functions within your body that can really help reduce symptoms, help you manage your weight, and just contribute to overall health and well-being. And I think that is it.
Yeah, just a little bit about Stronger You to end up here. So, again, those who aren't aware of our program, so we have individualized coaching, and so you're matched up with a coach, and sometimes just having that person to check in with once per week. We have you tracking your food, your habits. We help encourage you to stay on track. When you're feeling these symptoms and you're feeling stressed out and you want to give up and you just want to go out and splurge on the food all the time, or whatever it is you're doing to reduce stress that isn't supporting your goals, sometimes working with a coach can be that thing that really helps you stay on track. And so we work with a lot of women in this age range who are perimenopausal, postmenopausal, and it's just such a joy helping them kind of navigate through these changes successfully, right? And feeling good about themselves, feeling better about themselves, reducing symptoms, because we are keeping them on track with these healthier habits. These are some of our amazing members that are highlighted on this screen here. So with that, thank you guys so much. I forgot to mention in the beginning, if you guys do have questions, you can leave those either. There's a Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen, or you can also put in the chat box. We have the three of us kind of monitoring where the questions are coming in. If you guys do have any questions about anything or about Stronger You as a whole, you can email our member experience team at info@strongeryou.com. Our website is strongeryou.com. We just revamped our website. It looks beautiful. Our team did a really good job with that. Again, my name is Jessica Bachman. I'm docbach_StrongerYou on Instagram, or Jessica Bachman on Facebook. You can follow me on there too and ask me questions as well if anything comes up. So with that, we are going to go ahead and address some of the questions that have come in.
Yeah, I got a couple I'll knock out real quick. One question was from Sharon. Do you mean getting tested for those hormones? Yes. So ideally, annually, you should get a physical from your general MD or your gynecologist, whoever. And ideally, what you would ask for that is, oh, I lost it. Where'd it go? So ideally, what you would ask for is getting a hormonal panel done. And usually, not always, but your gynecologist will do a hormonal panel to kind of see where you're at and where your levels are at. And they'll test FSH and LH, primarily two indicators of menopause. And now, because it's a little bit newer, if, hopefully your doctor knows about AMH, anti-Müllerian hormone, you can ask to get tested for that. Since the FDA approved it, you actually could order, it off of, I think it's on Amazon now. So easy access, just like anything else.
That's interesting.
I know, right? I don't know how much I trust it, but you can get it. All right.
All right. We have a couple questions that have come in through the question box. And so Rebecca asked, can you address why it is harder to lose weight if one is still moving or exercising the similar amount, but doesn't have the same response as it did when we were younger? I feel like the same amount of exercise doesn't produce the results it used to. Thank you. So I can answer that from personal experience, and it really has to do with the caloric intake. I really do feel that, like I said, before I was running, 4 days a week, and I had been running and I was very active. But I had not changed my nutrition at all. And suddenly, because of the changes that my body went through with my hormones, with, everything we've just covered, my body responded quite differently to it. I thought I could just continue on with the same diet, if you will. And you need to make a real concerted effort to look at your nutrition. The other thing that I would highly recommend is increasing that NEAT that Jess talked about, that non-exercise activity thermogenesis. I did not realize how sedentary I was. I thought I was an active person because I was running, a couple days a week. But when you looked at my step count outside of my runs, it was actually quite low. And so I try and get 10,000 steps a day outside of my running. And so I actually work on my treadmill a lot, and I do a lot of my work on my treadmill, and that really does get me quite a bit. I walk around my neighborhood. I pace when I'm on my phone. I pace while I'm brushing my teeth. I will do, when we talk about NEAT, we are talking about anything that is moving your body: gardening, vacuuming, running around after the dogs, running around after the kids. Anything that is not exercise related movement is what we're talking about. So I think that's been a big game changer for me.
I want to add one more thing to that, because you talked about food some, and I don't know how you're eating, what you're eating, but so many people think that they're doing one thing. And then if you actually track your food, I would say you don't have to track it every day if that's not something you're interested in doing. If you just track your food for a few days, every single thing you put in your mouth, you sometimes realize areas too, like if you're saying that your progress is based on wanting to lose weight or change your weight, whatever that is, we take these bites of food and don't recognize that we're actually doing it. There's so many different areas. If you're not tracking, you're basically just guessing. And so tracking your food intake, tracking your activity is one way to really make sure that you are eating the amount that you think you are. And if you are still gaining weight and you don't want to be, you can find opportunities where you can make changes, whether it's eating a little bit less of certain meals, skipping snacking, watching the little bites and tastes of foods that you're taking. And so tracking can be really, really helpful for that.
And that includes liquid calories.
I'm going to add one more caveat and add even more confusion to Rebecca's question here. So the other caveat to that is actually being on a deficit for too long. So I see a lot of women who have undereat because they think in their mind deficit, which is the way to lose weight. But if you've been at a caloric deficit for so long, your body recognizes that, and your resting metabolic rate and everything else actually suppresses with that. So at some point in time, your body would simply say, oh my God, we're not getting enough fuel. We have to stop actually utilizing fat as energy. And this will actually blunt the idea of weight loss. And when you think of tracking over time, besides the fact that there's a little bit of metabolic suppression as you go into later stages in life, you have to think of more in the sense of cellular disruption. You spent the last however old you are disrupting cellular function, and now all of a sudden, because you think you want to eat healthy, that it's just going to reduce body fat. It just doesn't really work like that. So it can get more complicated than that. But yeah, in the simplistic way of what Jess and Karen said, yeah, primarily focusing on what food you're eating really makes the most sense, and making sure you're accumulating, actually seeing what you're eating. But I just wanted to throw in the other confusing aspect to that. And that's the good thing about Stronger You, is where we can actually analyze this stuff and see where the limiting factor is with you, and kind of catch that idea and, reformulate the package and deliver it in a better sense.
It's been so fun for me eating more food and focusing on putting on muscle. Like, that is a blast, eating more food now and just trying to get stronger and bigger. Like, that's such a unique change from what I did most of my life prior to this. So I recommend that highly.
100%. And that's what Karen said. Karen said she ate 1,700 calories. A woman probably heard that and like, 1,700 calories. Whoa, you want me to eat carbohydrates? That doesn't even make any sense to me. But
they're delicious.
Right? But when you're supplying your body with the sufficient amount of fuel and you're moving in counterpart to that, our bodies are made for that. Like, we're made to utilize energy. That's why we have our systems the way they are. So when you do that and you actually, have that, I'm using Dean's word right now, higher energy flux, it actually makes more sense. And the book that I'm currently writing is called Muscles Over Menopause. And in all the literature that I've read thus far, and I can't even count how much, muscle is the winner, and muscle makes a huge difference as far as what outcomes are. And I didn't touch too much base on that because nutrition wasn't my part here, but I tell you right now, if you focus on that aspect, the strength training and eating sufficiently, I promise you, it will pay dividends in all aspects.
Yep.
All right,
All
cool.
right, so we had another question from Brandy. If you have night sweats, wouldn't that mean you're burning more calories at night?
You want me to answer that? Or Doc, you want to get that one?
It doesn't matter to me, but changes in core temperature have limited impact on calorie burn overall. So it's totally different. That's vasomotor changes versus you're not going out for a run to sweat. They're totally different things that are happening there. So no, that would be nice, but no.
Yeah, sadly. All right. Moira asks, do your coaches give a specific weight training plan or simply suggest a certain number of minutes per week?
So we do have a Stronger You Fitness program that is separate from Stronger You Nutrition, where you can get specific plans, but the nutrition coaches that we have are nutrition experts. So that's what they focus on. A lot of our coaches are very much into weight training as well, so they can have some conversations with you. We have a lot of our coaches that have other businesses too that are doing strength training, but Stronger You Nutrition's focus is on nutrition. And so we just give general advice for that because that's really what our expertise is in that role. But we have lots of resources to give you and lots of other things, lots of recommendations for other places you go to get that information. But no, Stronger You Nutrition is specific about the diet. And we change the diet recommendations based on what your physical activity is. And we do give general recommendations, but not specifics.
Cool. Perfect. Real quick, we have a question in the other chat box. Well, two questions. One question, if you're doing HRT, what symptoms lab work tells you to stop? Ideally, I'm going to let your doctor answer that one because they're going to be the one that's monitoring you. But the biggest key reflection to induced androgens is hair growth. And I don't know any woman that enjoys a mustache. So that's kind of one of the big factors there. But your doctor's going to tell you that stuff.
I legit had to pluck this morning.
Wait. So the other question is from Amy. So how long is too long in a deficit? And then how long is enough to eat not in a deficit and then go back to losing weight? The easiest way that I'm going to answer this, and you guys can touch base on that, is we're going to watch how your body responds. And ideally, if you stop losing weight, if that's your goal, or you gain excessive weight, we're obviously going to monitor that and adjust accordingly on how much consumption you need or what you should do.
There's, looking at research, people throw out specific things out there. Like one thing you'll hear a lot is like spend at least twice the amount of time in maintenance as you are in a deficit. So let's say you go on a weight loss program for 3 months, then spend 6 months. That's all just guesstimates. Every individual responds so differently. It depends on physiologically what's happening with you. Psychologically, it is tough being in a deficit if you're actually really sticking to a deficit for a very long period of time. So there is no rule about that. There's really no rule with anything with nutrition. So it's definitely going to be on an individual basis what's happening with you and all of your life, not just your body and how it's changing, but how you're feeling. Are you able to have energy to do things you want to do in your world surrounding you? Like there's a lot of things to consider about that. So there's really no rule and there's no exact cutoff for that.
I will tell you that I do a lot of talking with my members about their energy as well as their appetite. And if I'm seeing a disconnect, I'm like, okay, we need to maybe up just a little bit here and get these things stabilized before we start thinking about any more cutting. So it's very intertwined.
Yeah, 100%. And Jess, you said it best. I mean, the reality is there's so much fluctuation within physiology. And Karen, actually, you said it best in the sense of creating a lifestyle, because that's what actually matters the most out of the whole situation. It's not even necessarily about a deficit or, an influx. It's just about something that you can maintain.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, where are we at with questions?
All right, so I've got one over here. Colette asks, I've had an ablation. Is there any way to definitively tell once I'm through menopause? So my understanding, and Tony, you can help me out here, is that, so menopause is when you have not had a menses for 12 months. Mm-hmm. You are officially in menopause.
Correct.
You're considered post-menopause.
Yeah, it's exactly the same for all situations. If there is a surgery-induced type menopause, then ideally like hysterectomy and stuff, and debating on ablation and where it was and what happened, ideally they go right into menopause. But a lot of the times a doctor will induce estrogen to kind of, debating on how old they are, to kind of carry them through. Like if you had a hysterectomy in your 30s, you're automatically going to go on, estrogens. So you don't receive as many negative aspects of menopause that early in life. But you could use what I was talking about when I first opened up the conversation. You could use hormonal tests to tell you that as well too, debating on, what your FSH and LH and AMH are doing in your body.
Roma asks, any research on body hair loss due to menopause? And I'm assuming this is head hair as opposed to other body hair loss. I personally didn't lose a significant amount of my head hair. I definitely have gained some new little friends, as I like to call them, on my chin. I don't know. Is there any research on that, Tony?
I've never seen hair loss. The only time that I've seen hair loss in relevance to that was when somebody was inducing testosterone, because the byproduct of testosterone can be hair loss. But that was exogenous testosterone injected or through pellets. I've never seen it in relevance to androgens, because that's kind of the counterproductive aspect, just like you were talking about. You got the chin hair growth. So no, besides the injection of testosterone, that was it.
With pregnancy, you often will get an incredibly lush head of hair through pregnancy, and then post-pregnancy, you can have significant hair loss because of the fluctuations in the hormones. But I'm not sure about that. Jess, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's not something I've come across. Doesn't mean that it's not. And again, there's such a large variety of symptoms that can happen with menopause and those hormone changes, that if that's happening for you, maybe it's time to talk to your doctor about that and start having some tests done, because maybe that is an early symptom for you, an early sign that you are starting the perimenopause. It just looks different for so many people. It's not a common one I see, but I'm not going to say it's definitely not indicative for sure. But if you are losing substantial hair loss, you definitely want to talk to your doctor anyways, just to see what's kind of going on, get some blood work done and see what's changing.
An anonymous attendee has asked, I'm in maintenance with Stronger You, and I still track and I'm on target. As I approach perimenopause, do you recommend adding in any supplements, for example, creatine or whey, or nutritional timing, for example, pre-post weightlifting, to help reduce muscle loss and promote muscle gain? What next level tips might you have?
Do you want me to start? I can start with that. To me, whey is not a supplement. So whey is just another way of getting protein in. And so if you are following a program with your Stronger You coach, you're likely going to be on adequate amounts of protein to get the amount in that you need to maintain muscle mass. And so you can absolutely use whey if that's what you need to use to hit those numbers per day. But if you're getting that from food, there's no additional benefit. Creatine, I actually do take creatine every single day because I do a lot of weightlifting. And so for me, it gives you a little bit of extra energy to lift a little bit more weight. That's what creatine does. And so if you are someone who's doing weightlifting, there might be some benefit there. Creatine is a very, very safe supplement. It's fairly cheap. Like if you want to try and do that and see if it has an impact on your ability to build lean muscle mass, it's not going to hurt overall. I forget the rest of the question. So those are...
it was nutritional timing.
Nutrient timing can definitely have an impact for some people. If you're already doing everything else perfect, and you're looking for the next thing. And by perfect, I mean, you're hitting your protein every single day. You are strength training. There is potentially a role for having a little bit more of a benefit if you spread your protein intake throughout the day. Anytime you get 25 to 30 grams of protein in, you're going to hit what's called the leucine threshold, which is going to encourage your body to maximize muscle protein synthesis, right? So anytime throughout the day where you can have that amount of protein, you're gonna maximize that. And so if you can spread that out, if you can spread your protein intake out to multiple times per day, there is some benefit there. Again, the most important thing is when you're getting adequate protein throughout a whole 24-hour period. But if you can have protein in 30 grams at 3, 4, 5 different times per day versus having all of your protein with dinner or in a shake at bedtime, if you can do that multiple times per day, there is some benefit there for stimulating muscle growth. As far as surrounding workouts, it depends on your types of workouts. So that's going to have even a smaller impact than making sure you're having it throughout the whole day. So that's an even smaller thing to kind of worry about. But if you want to absolutely maximize what you're doing, if you're lifting weights, having some protein and carbohydrate pretty soon after strength training might have another additional small impact. But again, those are small. The big rock you want to aim for is adequate protein throughout the whole day. That's the most important thing to focus on.
All right,
Roma, girl, there's nothing to add to that besides you're awesome.
Roma asks, I am post-menopause and never been on HRT. I weight train regularly. Can I build muscle at 67? You are building muscle.
100%.
Right?
1,000%.
1,000%. Don't stop. I mean, one of the biggest reasons why I really started throwing in strength training into my overall training program was, seeing my friends' moms start to fall and get broken hips. And I just was so terrified of that. I'm like, I don't want to be one of those statistics. I really don't want to be. And so continue to strength train. And again, you're going to be building bone growth with strength training, but also you are building muscle. Now, are you going to bulk? Again, I just like Jess, probably not. No,
no. I mean, it comes to hyperplasia or hypertrophy. There's different formalities of it, but in the sense of becoming more dense and stronger, and like you just said, stability, that aspect, 1,000%. As long as you're eating sufficiently, you have to provide your body with enough nutrients and macronutrients to enable that to happen. And what Doctor said about, leucine threshold, you have to be eating your protein. And without a doubt, we talked about carbs earlier too. You have to be eating your carbohydrates. And then at the same retrospect to that is you have to be eating your fats as well, because you can't build hormones without fats. So you got to make sure you eat. So don't be afraid of the food. Don't be afraid of the weights. Get out there and kick some butt, train hard, and things will happen.
I would say with training too, like just lifting weights is not enough either. Like you need to be following a program where you're actually lifting heavier weights, right? You're putting new stress on your muscles on a regular basis. So if you're not following a specific program, that might make a big difference in how you're doing it as well. Like you can add a program in there where you're actually aggressively overloading your muscles, can have a big impact.
One of the things that was very eye-opening to me as I started this journey through menopause was sort of the cultural beliefs around menopause and what can happen to a woman and what should happen to a woman. And I think that by focusing on health, focusing on nutrition, focusing on movement, I sort of broke that myth, that belief. In fact, even when I went into my doctor at one point during this period, and she's like, "You're losing weight. Is that intentional?" I was like, "Yeah, it is." And she's like, "Well, you're going through menopause and you really, you shouldn't be losing weight." And I was like, "What? Wait, what?" And so there is this belief that we're not supposed to, or that we can't lose weight during this time. And I think that culturally that is really out there. And by focusing on strength training, by focusing on continuing to move your body, by focusing on your nutrition, don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of going against what culture tells you should be happening to you. You can absolutely break that rule. You don't have to follow that. Here's another question about a strength training program that we recommend coming from Christy. I run 3 to 4 miles a day, 5 to 6 days a week, and do lift, but would love to follow a program. And I think we've kind of answered that question. There's a whole bunch of them out there. So, other thoughts on that one?
No, there's nothing definitive that makes it better than one another. In the literature, strength training makes the most sense. So ideally, strength training consists of a lot lower reps with higher amounts of intensity, meaning weight. That shows to be higher productivity in a sense of reformulating bone. But in the sense of trying to develop muscle, an hypertrophy workout, and ideally that's 8 to 12 reps, that would be more beneficial or more bang for your buck. So ideally, it's going to matter on what your goals are and what you really want out of it. And then at this point in time, it's either get with one of our programs or hire a local trainer and have them develop it for you, because they're going to be able to see you, do a client questionnaire, analyze everything, look at your food, and then they'll develop the better program for you.
Ruth asks, Tony, do you have an opinion on saliva-based hormone testing? This is available via a kit from a local homeopathic pharmacist whom I respect very much. I have a strong medical background myself.
Ooh. Salivary testing. One, it kind of depends on what hormone you're referencing, but ideally within the literature, the most prevalent hormonal testing that makes the most sense, saliva-based, is cortisol. Other than that, salivary aspect of testing, there really hasn't been much prevalence, and there's way too much flaw within the testing. So I would say if you're doing a cortisol testing, absolutely. Other than that, then, serum obviously supersedes just about everything else. And then urine backs that up. And there's also stool testing as well. But urine, looking at metabolites, there's the Dutch test that is pretty relevant. But salivary testing for cortisol is the only thing that I really strongly stand behind. Everything else, there's a little too much flaw for me.
All right. Roma wants to know, Jess, how do you know that you've put on 3 pounds of muscle since there's not really an accurate way to measure body fat percentage?
I don't. I absolutely don't. But I'm about 5 pounds up steadily now, and just my personal, what I think is looking at my own body. So I don't do any body fat testing. When I worked at university, I would have DEXA scans because I had access to that. Now I'm not there anymore. So I have not done any body scans. So that's just what I think based on my scale weight changes, what my body looks like. I think it's probably about 3 pounds of muscle. So it's absolutely a guess. Yeah.
All right. And Mary wants to know, will taking pellets decrease the ability to lose weight?
That is a very ambiguous. There's no answer to that. It just depends. And there's so many factors that go into that. Just about everything that we've said for the last hour and 11 minutes will account into that equation. So it just has to be the right atmosphere, right time, right person, right place.
Yeah.
So answer is that no, I don't know. I have no idea.
All right. And that is, oh, wait. Mary says, I get estrogen and testosterone.
I really can't answer that because I don't think there is a definitive answer. But in the reality and what I've seen through clients, within eating, eating very correctly and, training and all the different factors that accumulate, it usually helps in a sense of reduction of weight. Is it perfect? Absolutely not, but it definitely helps. That's what I've seen.
Yeah, going back to the basics of weight gain, that's always going to be the biggest impact is going to be the calories you're consuming, the calories you're expending. These other things may have a small impact too, but the most important thing is going to be that balance there. And so as long as you're, eating the correct amount, you're moving, you're maintaining your muscle mass, no, you're not going to be rented, no matter what you're doing with hormone levels.
100%. All right, we got some other questions here. This would be a good one for you, Jess. How does Stronger You match you with a coach, and does the program take into account other health issues, i.e. asthma, etc.?
So you are matched with a coach. So when you sign up for the program on the website, you fill out our whole intake form. So it asks you for a bunch of information about you, previous dieting, your height, your weight, your interests, what activities you're doing, etc. And then our member experience team reviews the forms that come in, and we do match up with the coach who's the best fit for that. Things like asthma doesn't really have a huge impact on the types of foods we recommend for you. So that in particular wouldn't have an impact. But if someone is pregnant, breastfeeding, has type 1 diabetes, they're matched up with a specific type of coach. And so it's our member experience team. So actually physical people, it's not just a computer that looks at your form and matches you up. There's physical people reading your form and then matching up with the best coach for that.
I think that's about, well, there was one other.
I see a question about resources, and I just want to say, I got this book for Tony too, because I think of him when I think of menopause. I actually really like this book, and I would highly recommend it. It's called Menopocalypse. I know it's backwards on right now. It just came out kind of recently. It is not super scientific, and it doesn't get in too far depth. I would give this to my mom to review. I actually really just enjoyed reading it as a fun read, but has some really, really good information, really well in line with the research I've read though too. So it has scientifically based stuff, but it's not written in detail. It's not covering all the details of the hormones, but I would, for the average person who generally wants to learn about menopause, I think this is a really, really good resource. I would highly recommend it for people.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Definitely enjoyed it. She's cool.
You're welcome, Britta.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, cool. I think we got everything. I don't think we missed any questions.
So yeah, Jen Sprague says, not a question, but I love Stronger You. Thank you for this webinar. Thank you. Yes, this is it has been an incredibly challenging period to go through menopause, but it has not been this it was not what I had been told it was going to be by my mother, by my sister, by other people going through it. And I attribute that to, again, that lifestyle, making positive changes to my lifestyle, being very conscious of what I was eating, being very conscious of what I was drinking, being very conscious of the movement that I was doing, exercising. I'll tell you what, you talked about strength training, and stress. And I remember there were times when I would go to the gym and I was like, I am lifting weights in anger today. And I had no idea why I was angry. You know, why am I angry? And it really was, you know, look over my shoulder. Well, duh, it was the hormones. The hormones. You know, your body, you get used to the way your body has been for 30 years and suddenly it betrays you. And it can be very hard on yourself. It can be very hard on what you've come to expect and how you relate to the world. And recognizing that and talking about it and making it not a scary thing, but it's a real thing. And I think it was the New York Times just posted or maybe it was the Washington Post, just posted a series called the Stories of Menopause. And it's a bunch of women talking about their experience, and it's absolutely fabulous.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'll
maybe
look for that.
Maybe we can link it or something. It was really powerful piece, really powerful piece.
Nice.
You know, women.
So I want to touch base since we got a couple of minutes on one more thing. So one of the things I always open up my talks or whatever I do when I'm regarding menopause is the primary thing that I have to make very relevant to all the women is you just can't get away with things that you used to. So one of the questions that we got before were, you know, how come, you know, referencing where you were back in the day, it just doesn't work like that anymore. So sadly enough, you know, with a lot of my clients, once they found out I was Mr. Menopause, all of a sudden they're like, well, what's the magic trick? And I'm like, the magic trick here is very strict compliancy and not kind of going off. In a sense, it's like you have to create a lifestyle that's relevant, but not all people. I have one client that, you know, she eats turkey sausages for breakfast and we haven't really been getting any traction. And I'm like, well, we might actually have to remove that turkey sausage and add something else in because that might be affecting your results. So if you're a woman that's struggling and you just can't find that right balance, and it might not be the exact macronutrients that you want it to be, it might be a certain food item, it might be something else, it might be an induced level of stress. So it is a level of menopause can be very, very complicated, and it might have to be to where, you know, things might have to tighten up. And if you have a goal of weight loss and you're not liking the skin that you currently live in, you might have to buckle down for a little bit and actually reformulate your lifestyle, or you might not get the results that you want. It's kind of a harsh reality.
Yeah, it is harsh. It's very harsh. And coming to grips with that was a challenge.
Yeah.
Sharon asked a question, is there a reason to get tested for those hormones if you are most likely in perimenopause and I'm having issues with my, and don't have any health concerns?
No, not necessarily. I mean, ideally, the reason I get tested is just the idea of knowing, right? You could simply just wait, you know, to see, oh my God, I'm not having my period anymore. But behind that aspect, there's always a question of why or what's going on with me. This solidifies that reason so you don't have to question anymore. And a lot of the times, one of the big things I tell, and I have a menopausal group on Facebook, it's called Embracing the Change. And I try to get women who are 30 years old in this group, and they're like, oh, I'm not even close. But I'm like, look, if I can get you to lock it in at 40 years old, by the time you get to 50, this shit is going to be so, am I allowed to say that? But this stuff
Too late.
is so much better. And I promise you, it won't be perfect. Nothing's ever going to be perfect, but it will get better. But you coming to me at 52 years old with all this dysregulation and uncontrolled eating habits, and you're saying, hey, Tony, make this work for me. And I'm like, where do I even start? It's like a dirty bedroom. Where do you start cleaning? You don't know. So it has to be done beforehand. And why I encourage women to get tested, because it's like, okay, well, things might start getting dysregulated hormonally. Well, that might be the kind of like key ticket to you saying, okay, well, now it's time for me to lock it in. Let me clean my lifestyle up and let me reformulate it. Because ideally, when it comes to changing a lifestyle, it is hard and it takes a really exacerbated reason to really do so. It's one of those things where it's like you wake up one day and you log on, you're like, all right, stronger you, today's the day. I need a coach. And you need some formality. And a lot of the times, I know for me, it's like I look in the mirror and I'm like, what is that? It's time to get back on eating better. So whatever it might be, but it is something that needs to be recognized early. And I promise you, it will set you for the rest of your life. And mind you, one thing, women, you live longer than men, on an average 7 years. So you better keep it right, because we're going to die before you, promise you.
All right, guys. So Abigail looks like she worked with Coach Jack and had a great time with him. Awesome.
Yeah, 100% much on. Yep. And Nicole asked, what's the group on Facebook? Is it
Embracing the Change? All right.
Embracing the Change.
I am super nerdy. So I pump out a ton of articles, but I dumb it down and I make it really relevant for everybody to understand. Knowledge is power, only if you use it though.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Tony and Karen, for joining me. That was fun. It was nice chatting with someone through these presentations. I really appreciate that. They want your Instagram too. You're gonna get some followers out of this, Tony.
Cool. I mean, that makes me feel more important.
All right, guys. So again, we'll send you an email once the video takes a little while for it to process. It'll either be this evening or tomorrow morning. You'll get a video in your email if you want to rewatch anything that we talked about today.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.